at 6:30 p.m. This meeting of the Planning Board will be held in person and may be available as live broadcast on Channel 18. Members of the public with an interest in any portion or specific item on the agenda should plan for in-person attendance. According to Mass law, anyone who intends to record the meeting must first notify the chair, who will then inform the other attendees at the start of the meeting. Anybody intending to record the meeting? No? Ask everyone to join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Since we have some members remotely, let's do a roll call. Dave Harris.
David Harris here.
Ann Tucker present.
Emily.
Emily Brady present.
Mary.
Mary Maslowski present.
Mary.
Harry Munns, present.
Alan.
Alan Peterson, present.
And Craig Chadwick, present. Thank you very much. We begin tonight with a public hearing for a continuation of the public hearing for proposed zoning amendment, bylaw amendment for the May annual town meeting. This is continued from 2/28 and 3/14/23 meetings. We've been debating this issue for the last couple of meetings as indicated, have had a lot of good input, and I think there's some further research that's been done by the town planner and staff that I'd like to ask Paul to share with the group, and then we'll open up for public comment.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So this is the third continued public hearing for the proposed amendment to the accessory apartment zoning bylaw. Since the last public hearing, I sent the board a memo with some information from the Cape Cod Commission, which compares the accessory apartment bylaws from the 15 towns on the Cape County. And it provides some detail on the different provisions that each town's bylaw has in it, and I kind of updated it by noting where this particular bylaw amendment would change the table that was provided by the Cape Cod Commission. So I hope this provides some more information to the board members and the public about how other towns have been regulating accessory apartments. The planning board received a letter of support from Kathleen Jarrick, and that was in the board's packets. I had sent the bylaw amendments, all three of them, to town council for a legal review, and I got back some comments from town council Amy Quessel yesterday, and she and I had a follow-up conversation this afternoon. On the table tonight, that was not included in the planning board's packets, was my follow-up notes from the conversation with town council. I'm going to just run through those briefly so that the board can hear it and everyone in the audience. I still need to have a conversation with the administrator's office about formatting the bylaw amendments in the warrant, and so I will do that and finalize it. The amendment included a definition of dwelling. So the proposed bylaw amendment has a new definition of dwelling, single family with accessory apartment. The existing zoning bylaw in section 2 has a shorter definition of accessory apartment. This definition that I inserted into the accessory apartment section of the bylaw is longer and more detailed, and this pretty much tracks what's in the State Zoning Act, Chapter 40A, Section 1A. There is one exception to that, and that is in the State Zoning Act's definition of an accessory apartment, it says that they are 900 square feet. When I revised the bylaw amendment, I increased the maximum square footage from 900 square feet to 1,000 square feet of gross floor area. So I'm explaining this because we now are going to have two definitions, a more detailed one in that section of the bylaw, and the old one in the definition section of the bylaw. And are going to need to go back and change the one in section 2, or just delete it, decide how we're going to do it. They don't actually conflict, but one's more detailed than the other. So I wanted to bring that to the planning board's attention. I did not go and try to change section 2, the definition section of the bylaw, because that was not included in the original public hearing notice for these bylaw changes. The third change that I made, and you guys have copies of the revised bylaw amendment on your table tonight, the only real change that I made was there was a section that was repetitive. There was one sentence that was kind of repeated in 2 places in section 3C. It already appeared there, and I had inadvertently added it later on, so I deleted the second reference to it so that we removed that repetitiveness. And the only comment of substance that I received from town council relates to the new requirement that I had inserted that states that if the municipal sewer main has been installed in proximity to the property, the owner must connect the principal dwelling and accessory apartment to the sewer, if available, prior to use of the accessory apartment. I was kind of cautioned by town council that we have a situation where it's not a Board of Health regulation, but it is overlapping between zoning and the jurisdiction of the zoning board of appeals, the planning board, and the building commissioner with zoning, with the jurisdiction of the Board of Health to regulate septic systems and the installation of the municipal sewer. So she explained to me that that could be flagged by the Attorney General, and that there are three possibilities. One is that the Attorney General would leave it alone, which is what I'm hoping. The other is that the Attorney General could strike that language out of the bylaw. And the third is that the Attorney General could just give a cautionary warning. And I've seen this several times before where Attorney General will just point something out from a legal standpoint, but they didn't find a section of a bylaw egregious enough or in conflict with the state constitution or existing case law to actually strike it out. So I've seen a number of cases where the AG will just provide a little bit of warning. So I discussed this with Amy Questle and the options, and I told her that I thought it was very important to leave that language in there, that there have been concerns raised at these public hearings about the impacts of additional sewage flow from the accessory apartments, increasing nitrogen inputs into the aquifer. And that I thought, one, that people reading this section of the bylaw need to know that they will be asked to connect to the sewer. Two, that this is going to be a measure to prevent degradation of the aquifer by requiring both the existing house and the accessory apartment to connect to the sewer if it's on the street in proximity. So after that discussion, we agreed that we would just leave it alone and cross our fingers and hope that the Attorney General would not strike that language. In addition to that, we talked about approaching the Board of Health and asking the Board of Health to incorporate language like this in their regulations. So I think I'll do that anyways, just to, one way or the other, if the Attorney General strikes that language, we will backstop that, hopefully with a rule from the Board of Health to ensure that any new accessory apartments that are on a street that has the municipal sewer, that they will connect up. So that's my summary of my conversation with town council over these bylaw amendments. I have to warn you that the solar bylaw amendment, she provided some additional comments, and she and I are going to talk about her comments on that on Thursday. And I'm pretty certain that I'll need to make some changes to the solar bylaw after that conversation. and the planning board is going to have to take another look and revote your recommendation on it, because I'm anticipating some minor changes to it. And that's as a result of a recent precedent-setting court case in the city of Waltham that I believe we heard about at that public hearing. One of the residents that came in and spoke mentioned that case. So that case has apparently changed the rules a little bit, and she explained to me that following that court decision, that the Attorney General was taking a closer look at solar bylaws to make sure that there were not any regulations that were unreasonable. So we are going to have to circle back and take another vote on that, most likely, and we'll provide revised copies of the solar bylaw to the board well in advance of the next meeting.
Thank you, Paul. Questions or comments from the board? Mary?
Question, please, through you to Paul. Was town council comfortable that the entire ADU bylaw would not be struck down if that provision was included?
It was just that provision where there was jurisdictional overlap between what the Board of Health controls and zoning.
Okay, because I'd hate to leave it in and have it jeopardize the entire.
It was not the case.
All right, because my understanding was always that if sewer was in the vicinity, that you were required under federal law anyway to, if not EPA, DEP, to connect.
I'll learn more about that when I meet with the Board of Health.
All right.
Other comments or questions from the board? David?
Yes, Dave, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, I'm not suggesting a change. I'm just curious, you refresh my memory on why we are recommending 6 months minimum lease as opposed to 12 months, which is seems to be the predominant decision of most of the other towns.
Mary?
I think it already has 6 months, David. That's how we had passed it at town meeting 2 years ago. You were on,
Yeah,
I'm
I
not
was
crazy,
on,
right?
yeah.
Thank you.
No, I understand that part. I'm just wondering why is 6 months preferable to 12 months?
If I remember
Seasonal
correctly,
workers.
we did it at the time because we didn't think 12 months was going to pass town meeting. And as a board, I thought
okay.
we had agreed to recommend 6 instead of 12. And I'm looking to Alan for his memory.
Yes,
Thank you.
I can confirm, yeah.
Thanks, appreciate it. Thank you.
Thanks, Dave. Harry?
Well, I'd ask the reverse of that question. Why have 6 months instead of no requirement for a minimum rental duration at all? There are 4 towns out of the 15, which is roughly 25%, that have no restrictions. And as I had begun to reply to the chairman in an email that Paul was good enough to alert us to the fact that we shouldn't have discussion, but I'd be happy to share what I was saying is that if there is a restriction as we make these rules, and I think Paul's done a great job with this. For me, anyway, just my opinion, we should say why. How does it serve the public to have a restriction on the duration of the lease? And I have no reasonable explanation for that other than it would pass town meeting or not pass town meeting based on having that restriction. But my understanding was Paul was asked to draft new language, new rules, and therefore being held to a standard that existed the last time this was done, to me just doesn't seem to make any sense. I'll leave it at that.
Mary?
I'm happy to comment again. The reason that we were asked to look at the ADU bylaw and what the ADU bylaw was for was to increase really year-round housing and not Airbnb housing. It was to increase year-round housing stock. So that was the original request, was 12 months, pretty much up and down Cape Cod. So that was how the model ADU bylaw was drafted, and that's what we were all asked to look at, with the intention of increasing additional housing stock for year-round. We made a decision at the board during a discussion that we didn't know whether the 12 months would happen, and we went with the 6 months at the time. But that was the reason for it. It was so that we weren't creating Airbnb rentals, we were creating accessory apartments for year-round housing. And that was the reason behind it, however many years ago. Just giving history.
Okay, thank you.
And just to clarify, the reason, excuse me, the reason that this bylaw amendment is before us now was not a question about length of rental time, but it was more about minimum lot size? Is that, do I have the right recollection? That we hadn't heard concerns, or it wasn't brought to our attention that the 6 months is too restrictive. That's why we can't do more ADUs. What's been brought to our attention is the minimum lot size was the,
That's what I was told, that was the big stumbling block to seeing more of these go forward. It's clear that there's a demand for short-term summer rentals, and there's a demand for long-term rentals for more of the local native residents. And I've attended a couple of different housing meetings over the last few months. There was 2 housing huddle meetings that were held where people that were involved with various sectors of the economy explained how they are having difficulty finding employees, and whether it was the service industry, restaurants and hotels, whether it was the medical industry, where nurses and doctors were accepting jobs and a month later saying, I can't find anywhere to live, or whether it was teachers that work for the town. The overwhelming concern was for providing more affordable year-round housing for the natives than the demand for short-term housing for summer rentals. And when you try to balance the need for those two things, the need to help our locals, to help attract employees, to be able to take a job and live on the Cape, far exceeded the demand for short-term summer rental housing. And so that's, Mary and I think, have done a good job of explaining and answering to your question.
other questions?
I just, one more comment on this, and I think I tried to articulate this last time and didn't do it as well as I could, but I have been approached by folks who have said, I really want to buy a property in town, but I can't necessarily afford it as it stands right today. If I had the opportunity to leverage part of that property as a short-term rental, that would help me to supplement my income, and therefore that I could, for the time being, afford that property, and hopefully as my career progresses, I might not have to rent that. I might not want to rent that for 6 months or a year, but I might want to rent it for 8 months during the summer again to supplement, so that I'm able to purchase this property. And I just, personally, I feel like by having a restriction, we're limiting, that kind of application as well, and there's opportunity to be more accessible and give all different use cases an opportunity here.
Thank you. Other comments?
Can I just add one more thing? I think it's kind of to me, it seems like it's self-regulating. If I own a property that has an accessory apartment, and I live next door, which I'm required to do. Do I want a young family there, or do I want people to come in and maybe make a little more money by renting it weekly? I think it's fairer to let the property owners make that determination rather than be restricted. I don't think there's one simple direction that everybody would go in if there was no restriction. I don't think everybody would be renting it weekly to vacationers. I think in many cases, people would say, no, I don't want different people in and out of my home or the property adjacent to my home, and other people would go in the other direction. So it just seems overly restrictive to me, which is why I made my original comment. And I think that it's a regulation that isn't necessary.
Other questions of the board? I have a question, or a comment. I found it interesting on the chart that you provided for us, Paul, that I think there's probably about a third of the towns listed that have no or 2/3 that have no minimum lot size restrictions, and about a third or so that do. And interestingly to me, was that Brewster and Orleans, I think, both have restrictions on the minimum lot size. Our closest neighbors almost. So I'm curious as to, and I know we've talked numerous times at previous meetings about data collection and getting some information from what our neighbors are doing, and not been real successful on that yet. But I'd be curious to know how their responsives are, whether they find that the restrictions they have in place are too limiting, or if they're successful. Just a comment. Anything else from the board before we open it up to the public? Thank you. Anyone?
This is Dave. Can you hear me?
Yes, Dave.
If the objective here and the need is to provide housing for lower income, not low income, but lower income people rather than renters for seasonal use, for their families to go to the beach and spend a week or two in our wonderful location. If we eliminate the minimum rental period, I think we will not be achieving our objective, because the doctors and the nurses and the teachers won't be able to compete with families that are willing to spend $3,000 or $4,000 or $5,000 a week for in a small location, just to be able to enjoy Harwich Port vacation season. So I agree that if we just let the market control this, we're not going to be solving the problem that everybody agrees needs some attention.
Comments from the public? Please state your name, and is there a sign-up sheet there, Shayla?
There was on the way in, we can bring, thank you.
I did sign that sheet, but,
Thank you.
good evening. My name is Brian Sullivan, and I'm the chair of the Harwich Board of Appeals. Last month at our February meeting, the board voted unanimously in support of the First Amendment draft with a recommendation that setback requirements be reviewed. I had a productive meeting with Paul, our town planner, to discuss setback requirements for non-conforming lots. This discussion resulted in the inclusion of Section 3K of a proposed amendment before you tonight, which is the zoning board of appeals may grant a special permit for pre-existing non-conforming principal dwellings and residential accessory buildings that do not comply with the setback or lot coverage requirements in the applicable zoning district. The Board of Appeals has not met since the current amendment was first drafted, but I can state with absolute assurance that based upon our board's previous discussion and desire to see setback requirements adjusted for non-conforming lots, that at our meeting tomorrow night, this amendment will be supported. The Board of Appeals has only heard a handful of cases involving ADUs, as the current guidelines for ADUs are clear that unless a lot is 20,000 square feet or over, with setback requirements required for 40,000 square foot lots, the opportunity to qualify for an ADU under the current code is low. Typically, ADU applicants before the Board of Appeals have lots under 20,000 square feet and non-conforming setbacks, and have presented cases demonstrating a clear financial hardship, and have done so in hope that by obtaining a special permit or variance for an ADU, not seeing a path for approval under our current zoning codes has been disappointing for board members when the financial hardship of the applicant is apparent, and especially when an ADU would not create any new nonconformities and would not have been detrimental to the neighborhood. The cases our board has heard, and I expect most applications the building department will process going forward, if this amendment is approved, will be for homes that will be converting existing garages and dwellings with no or perhaps minor changes in the structure's footprint. The exterior appearance of dwellings with ADUs that I think you're going to find that's going to be happening with this new amendment, if it gets approved, will typically not change. They won't look any different to the rest of the neighborhood. As pointed out by one speaker at the last planning board meeting on ADUs, the cost of construction will limit the opportunity for many residents to consider an ADU. One example of a recent applicant before our board was a homeowner that obtained a building permit and converted their garage into additional habitable space for his mother. Well, unfortunately, the mother passed away, and shortly after, the homeowner had a medical emergency that forced him to stop working. The unexpected early retirement has left this long-term Harwich resident and his family with financial hardship, and they want an ADU to generate needed additional income. Their lot is over 10,000 square feet, but with non-conforming setbacks that do not meet the requirements of a current ADU code. The amendment would benefit this family, and I expect other Harwich residents who need just a little more income to make ends meet. In summary, the passage of this ADU amendment will typically assist residents of Harwich with existing dwellings that can be modified within a reasonable budget to create an ADU and offer needed financial assistance. I can assure you that the Harwich Board of Appeals will carefully review each case before us with the intent to only approve special permits in which the ADU will not be detrimental to the neighborhood. Thank you.
Thank you.
Other members, other comments from the public? Yes, sir.
I'll sign in after. I'm Tom Donovan, new resident of Harwich, hopefully. I guess my perspective about ADUs and rentals, I'm thinking of doing an ADU or a cottage rental. And I guess at the last meeting a month ago, I was made aware of this new policy. In my thinking about it, just over the last month, the way I'd handle my rental, a seasonal rental, is I'd have a booking and I'd have a cleaning aid service. If I'm going to rent it for yearly, I do away with those, so the income is going to be pretty close to the same amount, whether it's seasonal or year-round. That's my point. I was in Santa Cruz, California for 40 years, and I noticed over the last 15 years, they've dealt with the ADU policies, and they come up with a set of plans for garages, and as well as the backyards of small properties and all that. You might want to take a look at that. There's a lot of good information there. So I'll look forward to talking to you later. Thank you.
Thank you. Other comments? Please.
Good evening, Tom Birch, resident of Harwich since 1980. business owner, own 2 businesses. I commend all of you for your efforts in trying to make this happen. I listened a little bit to the 6-month, 12-month. I think it would be absolutely crazy to take away that 6 month and just say, let the market bear, because what would happen is everyone would be renting for $2,000 to $3,000 a week, and it wouldn't solve the problem what we've got here. A 6-month window would allow us to rent to workers for the summer, for landscapers, for restaurants. And if you had a 12-month, it would defeat being able to rent to those workers, because they're going to go away for 3 or 4 months in the winter. I'm in the process of trying to build an accessory dwelling unit on my property. I'm lucky enough to have 65,000 square feet, so the 10,000 square foot thing is great for a lot of people. It doesn't come into play for me, and I like the fact that you bumped it up to 1,000 square feet. I've been in this town, I've seen it all. I've lost one child, young adult, who couldn't afford to live on Cape Cod, and she's gone. And thank God my son bought a starter house for $500,000, and he can stay. But he's going to want to have an accessory dwelling unit someday too. So if you guys had any questions for me as being around here for so long, feel free to ask.
Thank you.
Okey doke.
Other comments from the public? Yes.
Margot Fenn, Queen Anne Road. I have spoken before on this and asked some questions relating to potential water quality effects and so forth. Having listened to all of the testimony and reviewed the changes that the town planner has made in response to some of the commentary and questions that were raised in the process, I'm actually here to speak in support of this. But what I would like to suggest is that it's going to be very important for the planning board or the building department, the planning department, I don't know who the right player is to do this, but to set up a system to track this, to look at what kinds of applications you get. Are they successful? Are they successful in creating the kind of housing that you want? And I think it would be really important for the town to know that. Is it making a difference to do this? I think there are some big obstacles to doing it financially for a lot of people. But if it can be done and it can provide some workforce housing, it could be a really good thing for the town. So I just wanted to suggest that. Thanks.
Thank you. You're singing my song about tracking in the data. Other comments from the public? Mr. McMahon.
Hi, Ed McManus. I was on the Board of Selectmen back when we first established an ADU policy, and it was tied to providing housing for very low-income people and required deed restrictions and a whole variety of requirements in the end project. Of that was essentially no ADUs were created. It was amended, that initial ordinance or bylaw was amended, pulling some of the restrictions, but it still had the restrictions on lot size and a number of other things that still made it impractical for most people to even attempt to create an ADU. I think getting to this point where a lot of those requirements on lot size, et cetera, are being made less restrictive will usher in a period where I think we'll see some housing created to provide housing for year-round and for the what I call the long seasonal workers, the restaurant workers, the landscapers who are here for 6 or more months to take care of the season. And I think that's what we need to provide, that type of housing. We certainly don't need to create investment avenues for more Airbnb, seasonal investment properties. Thank you.
Thank you. Other comments?
Good evening. I'm Ginny Hewitt. I live in Harwich Center, and I'm thinking of, I would love to build an ADU. My property in my zoning district requires 20,000 square feet, and my lot is 17,000 square feet. An ADU would provide income for me and make staying here, as I look to retire in the next few years, would make staying here affordable for me. I also I'm lucky in that one of my 3 children still lives in Harwich. They were raised here, but like most, the 2 have moved off Cape, but I have one that stayed here. But that won't be the case if you can't find a permanent home to live. He'll never get into the housing market here. And right now he's living with me. So I'm looking to convert my garage or perhaps add on to some rooms in the basement. So this would be within the same footprint. So it really, the same number of bedrooms in the house, in the 2 units. So not affecting septic at all, no change in setbacks, definitely not affecting the character of the community at all. No one else would know that they're 2 separate dwelling units. I feel like it definitely, what it would change is our happiness and our ability to have 2 separate independent lives there, 2 different units. And if in the future, it's hard to believe, but if a future daughter-in-law decides she does not want to live so close to her mother-in-law, then I will still have extra income from the ADU. One of the things, when we passed the accessory dwelling bylaw in 2019, the Cape Cod Commission had a big push to get towns to adopt this, and we did. And now they're recommending changes based on the fact that very few are being built. And I just looked at the website. The Cape Cod Commission has a model ADU bylaw from January 2023, and it recommends that there be no square foot requirement for lot size. So, and I've heard people say the effect of this won't be huge. We'd be lucky if we get 5 built in a year. And I've heard some of the planning board members say, well, then maybe we should wait and study it some more because it's not affecting that many people. I think for the 5 families that it affects, it's life-changing for the 5 property owners and the 5 people that get to live in the ADU itself. So I think you can't underestimate that. It would be a shame to miss this opportunity and wait another year. No matter what part of housing we look at and whatever board or committee has to look at it, like, oh, let's continue to study this area, or we like this, but just not here. And I think we have to do something, and I don't think this is something that changes the character. It doesn't seem, it isn't going to affect the environment because it's not increasing the number of bedrooms on a property, and so I just don't see the downside. So I hope you'll consider passing this. Thank you.
Thank you. Other people from the public comments? Thank you.
Hi, Ann Schippenhaus with Housing Assistance Corporation and Housing to Protect Cape Cod. Thank you for letting me speak. I'm speaking in favor of this amendment for a number of reasons. We have seniors coming to our door every day who are struggling to make payments on their mortgages, payments on their houses. They are on limited income and they need an opportunity to find a way to, one, stay in their community and age in place, and an ADU is a great option for them. They are concerned about home health care workers, and there's been a lot of discussion at one of our summits about how could we kind of mix the two to find home health care workers places to live on the Cape where they could potentially help a senior stay in place and help them survive. We also are hearing from young professionals that although we think everybody from 30 years ago wants to graduate college, get married, and get a house right away, that's not what millennials want now. They want to be able to graduate, live in their own space, make their own career, build wealth, and find a partner and establish themselves. And right now, with a $700,000 entry point for a new home, most 25, 26, 27, 28-year-olds can't even afford it. Even 40-year-olds can't afford it. So I'm hoping that you think of this to to help the population here, to give opportunities for people to stay and find a place to either cohabitate with senior to help them out, or a family, or someone who's just coming back and not wanting to live with their parents like my kids. I don't want them to come back and live with me for 5 or 10 years because they can't afford it. I'd like the ability to have someone somewhere for them to go. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Mary Anderson, East Harwich, and one of your selectmen, and I applaud you for this discussion, and I've just come to pitch that you support this. We all know, we've all commented, we have a housing issue. This is just a small piece of the puzzle. It doesn't solve the problem, but as Ginny Hewitt said, if it takes care of 5 people, that's 5 more than we took care of yesterday. I think Paul's done a good job with this. Amy Questle has given us a little more to look at, but I'm really encouraging you to pass this so we can get, if we get 5 in the next year, I'll be surprised. In fact, I'll put a beer on it if anyone wants to take me up on it. Thank you.
What's the over and under? Other comments, please? Anybody on the board? I have a question, procedural question. What's being asked of the planning board is to recommend an amendment to the Board of Selectmen for the warrant article for this town meeting. Is that correct?
Partially correct.
Okay, help me, please.
So the State Zoning Act requires the planning board on any zoning amendments to hold public hearings, advertise them, which we've done, and then it requires the planning board to give a report to town meeting with your recommendations whether or not to support or not support the bylaw amendment. So for tonight, we've now, as you know, kind of run out of time. The selectmen are finalizing the warrant. I've been instructed to give final versions to the town administrator by Friday, so the selectmen can close the warrant and get that printed. And so for tonight, the planning board procedurally will need to vote to close the public hearing, and having accepted all the testimony tonight, close the hearing, and then vote to make a recommendation to town meeting. You can make that recommendation tonight, which I think would be preferable, or you could put it off. But as I understand it, the recommendations are oftentimes printed in the warrant. So as the voters are reading the article, they can see whether this is something that's been supported by the planning board and by the Board of Selectmen or not. And so I think that you guys have taken enough testimony, and we're at a point where you can stand up and be counted and make a recommendation to town meeting.
So, for clarification, our recommendation is simply that, a recommendation. The Board of Selectmen can accept it or not accept it, put it, if we voted not to support this amendment, the Board of Selectmen could still choose to put it on the warrant and it would go to town meeting.
Yes.
Okay, so it's more of a courtesy recommendation, if you will, than.
Well, I'd like to think that, and I'm
An
going to
endorsement.
take this the wrong way, but I'd like to think that since the planning board works with administering the zoning bylaw, that you become more expert in land use regulations and familiar with the zoning bylaw, so that your recommendation to town meeting should have some weight, because you work with the bylaw and you process applications twice a month. I think.
A question. This had originally been presented to us as one of 3 bylaws. Are we voting tonight for just this one, and the other 2 are kind of on hold?
So at the previous hearings, the board closed the hearing on the flood zone bylaw amendments and voted to recommend approval.
Flood's done.
And I believe you voted to recommend approval of the solar bylaw.
Right.
But based on some comments from council, I think we're going to just have to revisit that and re-vote that.
Okay, so this is the only one we need to vote on tonight? Mm-hmm. Great, thank you.
Mary?
Can I move to close the public hearing?
Second.
Public meeting, we have a motion and a second to close the public meeting. All in favor?
You need a roll call vote.
Oh, that's right. Roll call, David? To close the public meeting?
David Harris, aye.
Ann Tucker, aye.
Emily Brady, aye.
Mary Maslowski, aye.
Harry Munz, aye.
Alan Peterson, aye.
Craig Chadwick, aye.
So I'd make a motion at this time that we vote to support and the ADU bylaw as amended and presented to us this evening, recommend it to, for passage at town meeting, and send that information back to the selectmen for inclusion in the town warrant.
Do we have a second?
Second.
David Harris, second.
Thank you. All in favor? David?
David Harris, aye.
Ann Tucker, aye.
Emily Brady, aye.
Mary Maslowski, aye.
Harry Munz, aye.
Alan Peterson, aye.
Craig Chadwick, aye. Okay. Thank you all for your participation, those here in public and remotely, and to the board. It was an interesting deliberation over the past 2 or 3 meetings, but hopefully we've come to a conclusion that will move positively forward at the annual town meeting. Thank you. The next item on the agenda, if I can find the latest agenda, is, this is a public hearing for case number PB 2023-08. Richard Thompson, through his agent Bayside Builders, is requesting a special permit for a 2-family use. The application is pursuant to the Code of Town of Harwich, 325-51N, and MGL Chapter 40A, Section 9. The property is located 100 Route 28, Assessors Map 10, Parcel L5, in the residential medium density and commercial highway zoning districts. And
So I move that we vote to continue this public hearing to our meeting on April 26, 2023, no earlier than 6:30 PM.
upon the request of the applicant,
Yes.
Excuse me, did we see the date that was asked to go forward to?
It said scheduled to be heard April 26, 2020. Oh, we want to, I'm sorry. Let me amend that to,
The newest one says.
newest one to May 9th, 2023, no earlier than 6:30 PM. Thank you.
a motion to continue and a second. Alan, second.
Sure.
All in favor?
You need a roll call.
Oh, jeez. David Harris. David Harris?
David Harris, aye.
Ann Tucker, aye.
Emily Brady, aye.
Mary Maslowski, aye.
Harry Munz, aye.
Alan Peterson, aye.
Craig Chadwick, aye. Next item on the agenda is, excuse me, public hearing case number PB 2023-09. Elaine Brockway and Richard Meehan, through their agent, Attorney William Kroll, have applied for a special permit and waiver of site plan review to construct a detached residential structure with a bedroom. Application is pursuant to the Code of Town of Harwich, 325-44B and Section 325-55F, and Mass General Law, Chapter 40A, Section 9. The property is located at 1365 Orleans Road, Assessors Map 74, Parcel K2-1, in the rural residential and drinking water resource protection zoning districts. Mr. Kroll.
Good evening, Mr. Chadwick and members of the board. Point of order, if you would like to vote on the subsequent hearing, the next hearing, the Toomey hearing, it's my understanding that there's been a request to continue that hearing to April 25, and so that people wouldn't have to stay and listen to me and all of that, that you could vote on that now, and they could be on their way if you see fit to do that.
April 25th.
Thank you, but I love listening to you.
Well, thank you. That makes, I can count that on one hand.
I'll put that before the board.
So I move that we vote to continue the public hearing for PB 2023-10, Mark and Andrea Toomey, to April 25th, 2023, no earlier than, is it April 25th or April 26th? Because we have 25 on one and 26 on a
The
different.
26th is the Board of Appeals. Let me just double
Okay.
check on my. It's the 25th.
Okay, it's till April 25th, 2023, no earlier than 6:30 PM. Thank you.
Do I need to read that public hearing notice before we vote to continue it?
Probably.
Okay.
Can't hurt.
Public hearing, case number PB 2023, Mark and Andrea Toomey, through their agent J. Thaddeus Eldridge, PLS, are seeking modification of a definitive subdivision plan. The application is pursuant to the Code of Town of Harwich 400-11C, subdivision of land and site plan special permit, and MGL Chapter 41, subdivision control law. The properties are located at 0 Winnipoxet Way, Assessor's Map 102, parcels E13 and E1 through 4 in the RR zoning district. And we have had a request from the applicant to continue this hearing until April 25th.
So I move that we vote to continue the public hearing until April 25th, 2023, no earlier than 6:30 PM.
Second. Second. All in favor, David?
David Harris, aye.
Ann Tucker, aye.
Emily Brody, aye.
Mary Maslowski, aye.
Harry Munn's aye.
Alan Peterson, aye.
And Craig Chadwick, aye. Thank you. Thank you, Counselor.
You're welcome. Thank you. All right, so we're back to the hearing for Elaine Brockway and Richard Meehan. I'm Attorney William Kroll from Harwich Port, and I'm representing them. They're here seated behind me in the front row there, and have owned this property for quite some time. They're requesting a special permit from this board this evening and a waiver of site plan review, as they indicated in the petition, to slightly relocate the existing workshop. Meehan is an artist and has been so for a long time, and he has a workshop there that's a home occupation workshop, not a retail shop of any nature. Folks come and look at his sculptures and his works of art, mainly by appointment. So it's an art gallery workshop, and we're asking to slightly relocate it, put a full basement under, and then put an addition on for a residential, a detached residential structure with a bedroom, which is allowed under the bylaw and the definitions of accessory building residential. It says that if you want a bedroom, then you have to have a special permit from the planning board. And that's primarily why we're here this evening. The addition, as you can see from the building and elevator, the floor plans, will not contain a stove, and that's always been the litmus test with this board, is that you would not, if you don't have a plumbed-in stove, then it's not amenable to year-round use. So we would not have a plumbed-in stove, and the addition will not be rented. And that's the other litmus test, is that you can't independently rent this unit or addition. The existing dwelling has 3 bedrooms, so we're getting rid of 1 bedroom. We've met with the Board of Health about this, and Ms. Schoner from the Board of Health said, okay, get rid of 1 bedroom by opening it up, making it non-private, so it's not a bedroom anymore, and you can have a bedroom in the detached structure here. So we're not changing the number of bedrooms, we're not increasing the burden on the aquifer. And as I said, we're gonna have a full new basement under the renovated structure. And our contention is that the addition, renovated structure would not constitute a substantial detriment to the neighborhood, would not be a nuisance, would not result in any substantial increase in noise, odors, fumes, congestion, traffic, or the like, and again, would not be a detriment, a substantial detriment to the neighborhood, and ask that you approve the special permit request this evening, as well as the waiver of site plan review. Thank you.
Thank you, Counselor. Mr. Halkiotis.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The applicant has asked for the board to vote to waive the requirement for a site plan. However, they did submit a site plan that looked pretty complete and clearly shows the existing structures and identifies the workshop that would be moved a short distance and then have the proposed addition added onto it. So since they did submit a site plan, it didn't come in with just a narrative, and that site plan clearly shows what their intent is to do, I would recommend that the board vote to waive that requirement for a complete full site plan rather than go forward. They've also requested a waiver for parking under section 325-44B. And this section says the number of parking spaces required for a multi-dwelling may, by special permit, be reduced to not less than one per family for the duration of any special occupancy upon planning board determination that sufficient area is available and will be retained to provide such otherwise required spaces. The site plan did show the driveway area and a small area in front of the existing workshop where that looks like it had been historically used for visitors. And I think that they've got sufficient room to be able to accommodate the number of parking spaces that they're required to have. However, having said that, if the board would like to see those spaces more clearly defined out, you could make that as a condition. I've reviewed the application materials and the site plan, and I don't see any problem with the planning board voting to recommend approval. There are the findings that the board will need to make under section 325-51 that the board should mention when voting on this application.
Thank you. Questions from the board?
Yeah, this is Dave Harris. I have a question.
David?
On one of the drawings attached to this application, drawing A10, it appears to show a roof deck with access from a dormer, what appears to be the second floor. My concern is there a second floor or a third floor counting the basement? And if so, what is the floor area and what is the use of that? It could be considered another bedroom, I'm concerned.
I can answer that, yes. Most of the area is cathedral ceiling, as you can see on A10. Over to the right, it says storage only, and the where the dormer is storage only. It's accessible only by a ladder. And the Board of Health as far as I know, did not have an issue with that, to claim that that was creating a bedroom. But it's accessible only by a ladder, and it's storage only on that second floor.
Thank you. I would suggest that it be labeled as such.
And that's fine.
Thank you, David.
Or you can put that in your decision.
Findings. That raised a question, the explanation of the ladder. If I'm looking at the right place on A10, the drawing on the right-hand side there shows that dormer, and you said there's a ladder is required to get into that dormer space,
Into that area.
into that area? And then is a cutaway I can see of this building.
Right.
But it looks like there's a deck, will be a deck out there from that window or door in the doghouse or the dormer?
If I may ask my clients
Sure.
for a moment, I just want to be clear on what is being asked.
Maybe my question isn't clear.
Drawings that aren't clear.
That might be the existing structure. That's just added on. This is the existing structure.
Looking for A10. You're looking for A10?
Yeah.
This right here.
It's the full Monty. I don't know.
It looks like that's gonna be.
As I said, Mr. Chadwick, my clients have owned this property for a long time. Mr. Meehan was a couple of years ahead of me at Harwich High School, so I know that he's been an artist for a long time, and he's a traditionalist. And he said that he used to have that railing and deck on, that's part of the workshop that currently exists. He had a deck there, and he likes to go out there and sit and paint sunsets and landscapes from there. It's not intended as a luxury item, but it's part of his, it aids him in his artistic impulses.
Pursuits.
So it
Thank you.
appears that pull-down ladder will be given quite a bit of use.
Depends on the quality of the sunsets.
Or the mood for painting. Thank you. So in the dormer itself, then that, what is excuse me, depicted as a door rather than a window.
Right. That's a
Correct.
door for that use, yes.
So you would pull down stairs, go up the stairs, and then out. Paint. Got it. Thank you. Other questions? Or comments? Anything from the public? Anything else, Counselor?
No, thank you.
Thank you. I think we're ready for a vote.
So
I have a motion to
move that we
close-
close the public hearing.
Second?
I'll second.
Thank you.
Does that
Motion-
require a roll call?
Motion and second made to close the public hearing. And roll call. David?
David Harris, aye.
Ann Tucker, aye.
Emily Brady, aye.
Mary Maslowski, aye.
Harry Munz, aye.
Alan Peterson, aye.
And Craig Chadwick, aye. Thank you.
All right, now bear with me, I'm gonna take a shot. I move that we adopt the following findings of fact for case PB 2023-09, Elaine Brockway and Richard Meehan. The address is the location is 1365 Orleans Road in Harwich, Assessors Map 74-K2-1. Zoning district is rural residential, and the drinking water protection district. The lot size area is 21,033 square feet. The application documents consist of Form A, existing conditions plot plan by Moran Engineering Associates LLC dated 4/25/22. Proposed conditions plot plan by Moran Engineering Associates LLC dated 4/25/22. Plot plan by Moran Engineering Associates LLC dated 4/25/22. Sections A10 by Olympus Architectural Design dated 11/30/22. The floor plan 104 dated 11/20/22. A locus map and a butters request form, a municipal lien certificate, and the filing fee. Further, adopt the following findings relative to the waiver of site plan, that The application before us does not substantially change the relationship of the structure to the site and to abutting properties and structures. And further, that with respect to the parking waiver request, that the number of parking spaces required for the application is sufficient based on the documentation provided. And let me just. And I would further say that the application for the special permit, the proposed use does not adversely affect the neighborhood, that the specific site is an appropriate location for the use, structure, or condition, that this special permit for a residential accessory structure with bedrooms will not create a nuisance or serious hazard to vehicles or pedestrians, and that adequate and appropriate facilities will be provided for the proper operation of the proposed use. I think I hit them.
That sound like we've got everything? Second.
Second.
Somebody, seconded by Emily, thank you. All in favor? David Harris? David? You hear me? Apparently not.
David Harris, aye.
Ah, there we go. Thank you, David.
Ann Tucker, aye.
Emily Brody, aye.
Mary Maslowski, aye.
Harry Munns, aye.
Alan Peterson, aye.
And Craig Chadwick, aye. Thank you.
And then I would further move that we grant the waiver of site plan review, that we grant a parking waiver pursuant to Section 325-44B, and that we grant the special permit for residential accessory structure with bedrooms pursuant to 325-51A1 with the following conditions that, those are the conditions. Okay, that that based on the foregoing findings and waivers, that this special permit be recorded at the Barnstable, shall not be in effect until it's recorded at the Barnstable County Registry of Deeds, and that no changes to the permit be made without coming back before the planning board.
Second.
That makes sense? Does everyone agree? Paul?
Yes?
Bill?
Second.
Second.
And all in favor? David Harris?
David Harris, aye.
Ann Tucker, aye.
Emily Brody, aye.
Mary Maslowski, aye.
Harry Munns, aye.
Alan Peterson, aye.
And Craig Chadwick, aye. Thank you. Are we
We're
good?
I think we're done.
Good,
We're
thank you
good.
very much.
We hit them.
Thank you very
Appreciate it.
much. All right, next item on the agenda,
If I may, I have a question.
I'm sorry.
Uh, The amendment that Mr. Halkiotis was talking about, is that proposing, so I'm clear on it, to reduce the minimum lot size to 20,000 or 10,000?
To none.
Accessory apartment. The amendment eliminates the minimum lot size requirement.
Period.
And,
Period.
we've got an extra copy here that we can provide to you. So there are no, if this is approved, there will be no more minimum lot size requirements.
Billy, you can have mine if you need it.
for whatever it's worth, if I may. I'm kind of the threshold entry person that people come to that say, I would like to have an ADU on my, in my house or on my lot. And I can tell you numerous times, they meet all the requirements except the minimum lot size requirement. So that's huge. If you could change that, I think you'll see a significant increase in ADUs.
Well, Mary's gonna buy us a beer
If we get 5, so.
That's the kind of feedback we were looking for,
Yeah, we'll
like a
take it.
month ago, Bill.
Where were you the last time?
Yeah, exactly. Specific examples. Thank you.
Maybe we're gonna have you buy Mary's a beer.
So, I'm too busy getting ready for these types of hearings. That's the problem.
You're here for your clients and not for our public hearings. We understand that.
Thank you.
It's always a pleasure. Thank you. See you
Thank
next time.
Thank you, Counselor. All right. Moving on. Next item on the agenda. We're not, vote to approve minutes, but that vote will now take place on April 11th. We have the meeting, we have the minutes, but
Yes, that's what you haven't read.
we haven't read through, okay. Then the next item is a vote to sign a Wildlife Circle definitive subdivision Mylar.
And I can't.
Oh, Wildlife Circle is the name of the,
Shall I wait till the end for the signatures? You wanna do that?
Have we
Yeah.
voted to approve it already, we just
Yeah.
need to sign it?
just sign it.
Yeah.
You
We
can
can wait
take a vote to approve it, to sign it. The appeal period's run out and there's been no appeal taken, and so, I would suggest.
So I move that we vote to sign the definitive subdivision Mylar for Wildlife Circle.
I abstain from this.
Second. Anybody?
Who was the second?
Second.
Emily?
They're used to you seconding, Craig, you have to prompt them.
Can I leave this here for your signature?
Sorry.
We sat hearing tonight.
All right, roll call.
Right here, for that?
Okay. David Harris? Oh, you have.
I have one question for you.
David Harris, aye, but I can't sign.
No.
Am I correct in assuming this is something that came up before the board, before I was on the board?
Yes.
So
Yes.
I'll abstain, because I'm not gonna sign, it wouldn't be
You
appropriate
shouldn't,
for me to sign something I didn't vote on, correct?
That's the safest thing to do.
Yeah.
Likewise.
Looks like the other attorney has a different perspective.
No,
You? Oh, okay.
no, not at all. He's our planner, we should be
Okay.
relying on Paul.
Okay.
Okay, very good. So, David Harris.
David Harris, aye.
Thank you.
Ann Tucker, aye.
Emily Brady, aye.
Mary Maslowski, aye.
Harry Munns abstain?
Alan Peterson abstain.
Craig Chadwick, aye.
Yeah, it only has to be
So moved. Next item on the agenda is informal discussion. Mr. Thomas Donovan, adequate access for 10 Middle Road. And I'll give this to,
You can just pass it around.
I have a little video here.
just wait until, in front of a microphone for those people at home. Thank you.
Good evening.
Thank you.
I have a little video of Middle Road, an ancient way. And then I have documents showing current engineering, site plans, calling out Middle Road on the Route 39 end, and then site plans, zoning plan, calling out Middle Road, and then the final thing is the map down at Red River Beach. And it has the Eldridge family and the Bassett family both on the map, and it shows Middle Road coming on the Chatham side of Depot Road. And then that also shows the Bassett family owns, it looks like the whole triangle that Middle Road crosses. And the Eldridge family, further on in my purchasing my property, the search of documents showed that The Eldridge family owned my property and the two abutting properties. So between the Eldridge family and the Bassett family, that shows the, and I have information, I have a text from Jamie Bassett, current neighbor of mine on the Depot Road side, and he states that he has documentation, or that he knows that it's been in existence for 1862, I believe it is. So I'm just trying to show the existence of Middle Road as an ancient way, and predating subdivision. That's the purpose. I don't know if you're interested in seeing the video now. I've sent it to Shalala. You'll all get it in the, via email, and you can look at it. From the beginning of it to my property where I take a right, that's the direction I'm coming from. I dealt with planning department last year during COVID, and I was directed by John Idman to, and I did work without permission, but all I did was weeding, and I can document that before and after photos. But I want to, I guess I'm showing that from Depot Road to my property is 16 foot wide, if not more, plenty of height, and there's an existing hard surface roadbed on my property. Now, that leads me to believe that it came, it at least comes from Depot Road to my property. Jamie Bassett or somebody has started laying down shells, which myself and my lot neighbor, the Benjamins, Alyssa and Matt Benjamin, we all like the crushed shell look and feel, and we would prefer that to be consistent along the whole road, as well as I'm going to have it on my property, if I get it developed. That's, and then from my property on to Route 39, where it crosses Hidden Pond Road, you can see that it's a lot narrower. It's just basically a tread track through the road. I didn't do any clearing there, other than a tree fell down a couple weeks ago, and I cleared that, just off the road. But I didn't do any of my brush cutting or whatever last year. And that shows the road narrower and not conforming to the existing standards. And then when you cross Hidden Pond Road, it shows it, again, even narrower, and then it goes on behind a row of houses. And at one point, it widens. There's a house on Middle Road on that end that is owned by the people on the other side of the road. The same property, as in mine, it crosses their property. So they have a house on Middle Road as well as on Little Lane. So that's basically what I have. I have all the documentation reflecting what I've mentioned, and I've submitted it to Shalala, and that's all I have. I mean, other than taking it to the next step and finding out what you want from me. I mean, I operated from last year and what I thought was needed to prove that it was predated 1951 subdivision rules. And the other issue is there's only 5 lots on the road, this section of the road. It's undeveloped. There's no homes on it yet, except for that one over on the Route 39 end. It's zoned for 1 home per lot, except for Jamie Bassett's. And it's my understanding in my discussion with him last year that he only wants to put 1 house on his property. He said he'd love to have a house like mine, build it there and be able to live there. So I don't know of any other development. So other than that, I mean, I told my comment to planning department last year when they talked about the road surface, the shells, I said I'm willing to sign an agreement that at the time the road it requires subdivision, that I'll upgrade as well as anybody, that anybody else does. So I'm willing to, work with the town and do what you want, but I'm just trying to prove what I have, what I bought. I bought the property with a 3-bedroom house approved by the town with a site plan, septic, and everything. And so I thought it was buildable. So, that's why I'm trying to resolve that issue now with the predating subdivision rules. So all I can ask for is feedback, and I'll try to address your issues.
Thank you, Mr. Donovan. So just to clarify, on the agenda, this is listed as an informal discussion, so you're not here before the board requesting any waivers or anything at this time, just an informal discussion?
Yeah.
Thank you. Paul, comments?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm curious to hear from the longtime board members on how you've handled cases like this in the past. From town to town, they handle these situations differently. The state subdivision control law is a little vague on what's required in circumstances where there might be an existing right-of-way but no road built within it, a paper street, or in this particular case, it's in an unimproved ancient way. And so both the local subdivision rules and regulations and the state law requires that the planning board make a determination. And what we're talking about is the frontage for this lot, and is that frontage and is the road leading up to that frontage right now, is that adequate for this to be a buildable lot? Or does Mr. Donovan need to make some improvements to that unimproved ancient way in order for it to count as legal frontage for a buildable lot? And it's important that the board understand and acknowledge that this is not the only unimproved ancient way in town, that there are others, and that over time, as the availability of other buildable lots diminishes and there become fewer, there's going to be greater demand on the hinterland that just has dirt roads. So both the Subdivision Control Act and the local subdivision rules and regulations, I'm looking at page 2 of my memo to the board, number 3, and this is kind of where it boils down, where the state law and the local regulations come together. It says the planning board verifies the existing access to such lots provide sufficient width, suitable grades, and adequate construction to provide for the needs of vehicular traffic in relation to the land abutting or served thereby, and for the installation of municipal services to serve the land and the buildings existing thereon to be erected as specified in Table 1 of these rules and regulations. So what I was hoping we could do for Mr. Donovan tonight is to give him some guidance on what he's going to need to do, if anything, to be able to get a building permit for his lot to count as having legal frontage. And so there's a few options, ranging from nothing at all to building a full-blown subdivision road. And the distance between Depot Road and his lot is about 1,330 feet, so it's a good distance. And requiring him to build a full-blown paved subdivision road would be, I'm going to guess, cost prohibitive. And so what I think what I'd like the board to do is discuss this and come to a conclusion that we can give him some direction on what he's going to need to upgrade the existing dirt road to provide adequate, from a practical standpoint, adequate access, and from a legal standpoint, and this is where the precedent issue comes in, to be able to count that as legal frontage. In the past, the board has approved, like a gravel surface roadway, in certain cases, but it is connected to the number of house lots that could be built I haven't done a build-out analysis, but I did look at the number, I think there's just one big lot in between him and Depot Road. So at this point, I'll stop talking and I'll answer any questions that you might have, but I'm curious to hear from the longtime board members, just how have you handled these cases in the past?
Thank you, Paul. Longtime board members, I look to Mr. Peterson and
So I'm gonna look to Ellen. I don't remember us having a lot that have come before us.
If I recall, Mr. Chair, if I may, if I recall, as long as they met the width standards and all the other standards, like having gravel or clamshell or whatever was fine, so that emergency vehicles
So that-
would have
right.
access. So like, it would have to be constructed in a way where there would have to be
Maybe.
We need to
maybe
make sure that emergency
this'll answer
personnel
a
can
lot of
get
your
in.
Questions. Let me play this video. If you could turn the lights up, please.
Yeah, people at home.
No,
need
we
to-
we can't.
If you send the video,
I did.
I have it, but I knew we could not.
oh,
do
yeah,
it.
yeah,
He said
yeah,
to-
I'll watch the video. So, yeah, if there's,
There's-
I think that's the biggest thing, if
There's
there's,
plenty of, it's probably 18 to 20 foot wide
So-
from Depot Road to my property.
yeah.
But I
and
think it,
so, you know,
so from my perspective, it wouldn't just be the width would be important,
Yep.
but it wouldn't just be the width, it would be the ability for emergency vehicles to get in and be able to get back out again.
Correct. There's a
So-
turn on my property.
So the surface would also have to be
Sure.
improved enough that it would be that way. And I don't remember shells. I
No,
vaguely
think
remember
the
gravel.
The people who came before, this was years ago. The
Yeah.
people who came before us, they just wanted gravel.
Yeah.
Just because they're like, no one else is gonna see it.
This is,
That's just,
But I
this
guess
is
I would
Dave. I have a
also,
comment.
go ahead, David.
We also have to consider the terrain, not only whether there are hills to go up and down and how steep they are,
right.
but also side terrain to allow for culverts for drainage of water and things of that nature. So this becomes as much an engineering issue as it is, the type of surface and so on that may be appropriate.
And is this also a habitat area, a natural heritage? So that's gonna
That's a,
make a determination on what you can and can't do anyway.
I have some pre-information for you there. After my 8-month delay from Clark Engineering, I started work with Outback Engineering up in Middleborough. They took Clark Engineering's 2018 site plan for my lot and sent it off to Endangered Species Habitat Department. That day, they emailed back, and they said there will be no take of endangered species on that property. So that answers your question there. I haven't gotten the permit yet, but, I'm solid with that information, So as far as endangered species, that, I think we're resolving that issue pretty quick. I have to pay.
Doesn't that have to go through our conservation office?
Sure. Oh, it does.
I'm asking.
But, so, the cart's before the horse. If the planning board's gonna require that you make some improvements to the road leading there, that's what natural heritage has to, permit.
Oh, yeah, sure.
And I've seen situations where, the planning board, approved a subdivision and it included screening a detention basin with white pine trees, and natural heritage said, no, those are not good habitat, and you have to change the type of trees that are planted around to screen a detention basin. We've also seen them on an approved project eliminate vertical granite curbing, saying the turtles can't climb up over that, and went with like a Cape Cod berm approach. So that's good news that so far from your communication with them, they've said that there's no take. But I think you're gonna have to go back to them with whatever is decided in terms of improvements. And I guess the part of the story that I left out was that I provided to the board in your packets, there is an existing 2009 policy that was worked out between the planning board and public safety officials that requires that 16-foot wide clearance and 16-foot high clearance. And that's, to prevent our fire trucks from being damaged from a low-hanging limb. So within that 16 by 16 window, there's a road right now, an ancient way. And what kind of direction can we give Mr. Donovan that he would need to, if it does involve improving the existing way, he would need to come back to the board with a plan that shows a surface that, and dimensions of that, and whether or not that surface is just gonna be laid on the existing ground, graded flat and laid on the ground, and whether it needs to have any kind of sub-base under it.
Well,
Mr. Chair, kind of echo what Mr. Harris said. What's the topography? Is it flat? Is it?
It's from Depot Road to my property, it's flat. There's one little knoll between, it's on the Pina's property, on the south side of me, or east side of me.
Okay.
And then my property, as you drive into Middle Road, I have about 50 feet on the left, and that was cleared of trees. It was grown over with weeds and, some old bushes and stuff. And so I cleared that out with the Bobcat, so it's dirt now. And then my property is on the right, that goes 400 feet to the pond, to Rushy Pond. And on the left-hand side of my property, there's an ancient pathway that goes down to Rushy Pond. It starts on my property, half on my property, half on the Benjamins, and then veers off to their property. And it ends down at the well that was drilled supposedly for my property, but it was on the Benjamin's property. So, but that's an ancient, I met with the surveyors that were out for my civil engineer job that I'm having done, and they commented that this was an ancient pathway down to the pond, and they thought it might connect with the pathway off of Jamie Bassett's property. So, so that's kind of showing what the property is. It's flat. Now, on my property, where I want to build, it's to the right of the pathway, and the land drops off about 15 feet. So there's a slope, and then it levels off. And that grade, I can drive up it real easy with my truck. I've been down it once, but, it's not a real steep grade, and it could be leveled off to make it adequate. Basically, on my property, what I'm planning on doing is, on the left-hand side, there'll be the driveway down to the ADU unit or the cottage down below on the flat portion. So the driveway will go down alongside that, the house, between the house and this ancient pathway that we both want to keep in existence. And we're going to put a marker on it and note it as an ancient way. So that's the topography, and you'll see it in the video. It's pretty. I think you'll be discovering a hidden gem. That's it's an ancient way that you can see that it connected from Middle Road in Chatham through the Nickerson property, which is probably all overgrown. But if somebody walked into those woods, I'm sure you can see the path that is on the map down at Red River Beach. And it's noted that and it's in the documents that I have, that at most roads east of Harwich were dirt roads through the woods to Chatham and Orleans. That's exactly what Middle Road is an ancient way. We actually want to rename it Middle Ancient Way Road.
Thank you. Mr. Peter.
The road is flat, it's flat. I mean,
Excuse me.
From seven can ride a bike.
Excuse me, ma'am. I needed to recognize Mr. Peterson. When you you're welcome to speak, but we want to have you do it at the podium with the microphone so that people at home can hear. Thank you.
Thank you for that. I was just gonna say,
You can go, feel free.
My last question is, does Middle Road connect currently to Little Lane?
It crosses, no, it doesn't connect to Middle Lane. Little Lane comes off of Route 39.
Yeah.
And then they put Hidden Pond Circle.
Or whatever that,
And so it crosses Hidden Pond Circle.
okay.
And then it goes up behind the row of houses on Little Lane. And again, it's narrow in that first section from Hidden Pond Circle to, about halfway to 39. And then it widens up with the house on the left and parking and all that. And a wide driveway fenced on one side, actually it's fenced on both sides, out to Route 39. Where, I just want to make a note of it, the new subdivision, Newfound Pond Circle, is actually crossing our ancient way. It's depicted on David Clark's site plan.
So
It's
currently, is there like a path that goes there?
It's a path, it's
Is it-
a
is it-
true,
It's like it's
yeah,
the width of the regular road?
yeah. Tire tracks, just like a car's been driving it.
So it could be a connector from
Yeah.
that new development to Depot.
So there is an existing house from the entrance of Newfound Pond
And to-
Circle and Middle Road.
Okay.
There's an existing house about 500 feet down the road there, on the right, in the woods.
I just want to make sure that we're clear.
Uh-huh.
The only thing that we can really give you guidance on tonight is what we think is necessary for a roadway.
That's,
Because you're 20 steps down the road with your ADU and the building and the whole nine.
I know
So,
that,
so I just want to make sure that it's clear, because we don't want you to leave with any misconceptions as to what we're talking about.
I came with the intent of predating it and surface and clearance, acceptance to the city, the road acceptance to the city. Those are my two agendas tonight. Housing and everything else.
Has fire or police or anybody looked at it or yet, or no, because it's still informal?
There's been no application. Mr. Donovan did come to one of our community development meetings. It's so usual on Thursday mornings at 9. The building inspector, the health director, the conservation agent, and myself meet every Thursday morning at 9. We communicate about stuff that's going on that we need to talk about, but we also invite anybody that wants to come in on an informal basis or on a more formal basis where they've already got a plan and they're getting ready to file and they just wanted to get input from all of us all at once. They can do that. Or in this case, Mr. Donovan came in, briefed us all on what he was trying, what he was doing, and at that point, I said, you need to come in to talk to the planning board. You need to make improvements to that road. And in looking back at some emails from Elaine Banta back a year or so ago, she had indicated that he needs to get an adequate access plan approved of the planning board. So I want to just procedurally explain what usually happens. And so after he's given some direction about the road surface and the width and that kind of thing, he would need to have a plan done that shows the improvements both in plan view and a cross-section. The planning board would need to vote on that adequate access plan, and then he'd need to go and build it. And he would need to build that before he's able to get a building permit. So you have to get a building permit, you have to have frontage on a real road, and the board's gonna decide what in this particular circumstance is an acceptable road to accrue frontage off of.
And that plan that we would approve for the roadway is what would have to go before Natural Heritage in order to get approval before he could build it, correct?
Yeah, if the board voted to approve the plan and then he submitted it to Natural Heritage, they may want to see some changes to it, but that's the usual procedure. one final point is that many communities have gone forward and created adequate access regulations, like a little more guidance than what we have here with ours. And in the town that I live in, where I used to be the planner, we have 2 neighborhoods that were in 1923 on Christmas Eve, a surveyor laid out these 2,000 square foot lots, and there was 100 of them in 2 separate neighborhoods. And that included right-of-ways that there was no road, they were never built, they were paper streets. And so because there were 2 separate neighborhoods with hundreds of lots that could potentially be built on, they establish regulations for adequate access. Another town that I worked in, similar thing, similar process. But going forward, we should probably have a follow-up discussion about whether or not we want to formally set some clear rules so that people that are buying land off of these dirt roads, they know what's going to be expected of them in terms of a process to be able to get a building permit.
Other questions of the board? Harry?
It's probably that I just don't know much of anything about ancient, what was it called, an ancient roadway? Ancient way. But it looks as though Middle Road goes through, all the way down, goes through people's property. And I have to wonder, is there an easement or right-of-way issue that would enable a property owner down the road somewhere to actually encroach on the, let's say it's not 16 feet wide and that's the regulation. If that was my lot and you were going to take away 2 or 3 feet of it all the way down the road, I wouldn't be real happy about it. But I mean, are there rules in place or regulations that say that if you own that lot and the only way to get to it, excuse me, is down this road through private property, that you have a legal right to make improvements to it and encroach on that private property?
So the board could ask Mr. Donovan if his deed mentions that he has rights to use Middle Road. And hopefully the deed says he has rights to access his property via that ancient way. When I started talking, I said that the spectrum of what could be required on one end would be a subdivision where he'd have to create a right-of-way on either side of those dashed lines that's 40 or 50 feet wide, and then, build a paved road inside it. That's not what I'm suggesting, but that's the town of Lexington. You want to build on one of these paper roads, you got to build a full-blown subdivision. That's in the suburbs. It's a whole different situation. So something practical and reasonable in between where we are today with what's on the ground and a full-blown subdivision road is where we need the land. So theoretically, in his deed, it should say that he has rights to use that.
It does.
So
Does that include expanding the dimensions of it onto other people's private property?
So there's been, I think, some case law in this area related to this, and if people have rights to access their property, according to Mike Ford, when I was working in Orleans and he was town council, he said that they have the right to maintain and do minor improvements. Then we get into that great area where, paving, it's not a minor improvement. But he, I think along with the rights to use Middle Road, he obviously has the right to maintain it, and I think under the law, under case law, he does have the rights to make some improvements to it.
Okay.
Which, following up to Harry, which includes taking property on either side of the way that may not belong to the applicant or to Mr. Donovan.
No, I don't. There's no taking involved. There's no lot lines for a right of way. It's just you have the right to improve what's there to get in and out of your property for the intended use, which in this case is a single family home.
And to improve, and to do that, we set what the improvements are.
Yes, and
That's what's
that's
being-
what he needs some direction on. If the board's not comfortable with making any decisions tonight, this is clearly one of those situations where it'd be good to take a walk out there and see what's on the ground, and then make a decision. But I know he's been working at trying to develop his property for over a year now. He got kind of stuck in the middle of the pandemic and a turnover in staff in the planning office. And so we wanted to bring this to a head for him so that he could get going on his project.
Thank you.
Thank you. Following up on that, I personally am not comfortable at this point to say, you know, you need to have 3 inches of gravel and this, that, and the other thing. We're not, or I'm not an expert in any way about street engineering or anything. And I wondered, I know that we're not looking to make this, I believe we're not looking to make this a town-accepted road, but could we get information from Link or somebody in DPW and the Highway Department to sort of provide some guidance to us to say, you know, in order to support the fire truck that's got, you know, 500 gallons of water and 8,000 pounds, you need X number of inches of this and X number of inches of that.
And, you know, that's a perfect example because there isn't any town water there. In the event that there is a fire, the truck that holds how many gallons of water and how much does that truck weigh? If you're going out there this time of year in March, you don't want it to get bogged down in any mud.
Right.
So having a firm surface that can accommodate the everyday traffic and the traffic that is gonna need to bring the building materials to build his home, these are gonna be bigger trucks, and we don't want, you know, we need it to work from a practical standpoint.
Exactly. Oh, I need it to work that way. I mean, you know, I know a little bit about that, you know, at least that I need it to work. One thing I do want to say about the shells is I hate to, you know, I'm not, you know, I guess calling anybody out, but Jamie Bassett, he's a long time, you know, his family has owned the property for 150 or 200 years now. He's a local fisherman. He works down somewhere out in Chatham, and I think I visited the location where his boat is, and the whole parking lot is crushed shell. He's the one that's tucking in the shells and has laid them so far. I think they're, you know, more than adequate. I think they're as good as concrete, you know, as hot top, basically. I mean, once they're, you know, broken down and everything, it's a pretty solid surface. I understand the underlayment and support for heavy vehicles and all that, and I definitely I don't want anybody getting stuck out there and having it towed out or whatever. So, the turnaround area that you'll see, that's just dirt. It was weeds and everything. All I did was weed it with a bobcat rather than a rake and whatnot. So it's, but that area will be improved to meet whatever standards you need. But I know, first off, Jamie's going to be a disappointed 5th generation family, you know, property owner if he can't, you know, if he's told to take those shells up. So, and I'm going to be, we're going to be disappointed that we can't use them. You know, I mean, we're trying to do everything we can to improve the property and make it what you want, and make it the ancient way that it is. You know, it's, I can see even having it closed to motor vehicles, to public access, but allowing pedestrian and bicyclists to travel it. Because I think, you know, if with a project and connecting it to Middle Road in Chatham, if you can get the Nickersons on board, I think you'd have a gem here out in Harwich for people to walk and enjoy. You know, the problem, and one problem I see on just a little bicycles. The problem with those is, like on West Cliff Drive out in Santa Cruz and on the bike path here, if I'm walking and a bicyclist comes by me at, full speed, I'm elderly. I don't need to be hit by somebody, or anything like that. And so there's problems with bicyclists and pedestrians. So this could be a pedestrian-only pathway through the woods from Chatham over to Route 39. But I just want to make it what it can be.
So just a question through you to Paul. Paul, my understanding of ancient ways is a little different, and maybe I'm wrong, but I don't think it can be one or the other. I don't think you can say it's an ancient way that's provided public access and then restrict it and say that it doesn't. So.
I haven't commented on public access. This is obviously, it's neither going to be a public accepted road nor a private road. In order to be a private road, you have to lay out, you have to do a right of way and lay it out. The way the board has been doing subdivisions for years. So it's improving an ancient way. It's nothing more than that. So based on the discussion, what I'm to kind of bring closure to this discussion item, we will forward to you the video that Tom has sent to Shayla. I think we should all, we don't have to go out together, but we should all try to head out there, take a look at it, and then reconvene. If we can squeeze this onto the next meeting agenda, we can do that. It's very tight. Or give us a little more time till the February 25th, the April 25th meeting, and finish this discussion and hopefully give him some direction. In the meantime, I can also have a conversation with Link Cooper about what he would recommend we do in terms of a road surface.
Good, thank you. Before we do that, though, there are a couple other people in the audience. Anybody else wish to speak on the subject?
Mr. Harris has his hand.
Or David? David, go ahead.
Yeah, I understand, the planning board is not a design engineering body. For us to try to decide exactly what a road surface is and grade angles and that sort of thing is I think putting us in a bad position. There's two ways to pursue this. One, the applicant can propose a design and it can be reviewed by police and fire and the board and make a response. The other is for the town to make a decision as to what kind of a road does it need for emergency service and adequate access for the residents, and put that design in place so we have something to rely on in our decisions at the board. I do favor the latter because it makes more sense from an engineering standpoint, but I don't know what the legal applications and ramifications are. But I don't want to, we can go out and look at this, but I don't think that's going to position us to make engineering decisions.
I agree with you, David, thank you. And that sounds like you're saying the same thing that Paul suggested, that we, regardless of this before us right now, we work to establish some rules and regulations that we, if it's going to remain its planning board's responsibility, that we can adopt and refer to in the future. Correct?
And I think Link's recommendation, Chris Nickerson's recommendation to what they think would work there should go a long way to inform us on what to do.
Absolutely.
Always goes down back to fire and.
Right.
Yeah, yep.
A quick note is I do have a current site plan of Middle Road from Depot Road to my property. I believe that's all it is. I don't think it goes beyond that. I think they surveyed it, but I don't think it goes beyond there. But that, it's not available yet, and that's just showing that it's 16 foot wide, but it is a survey that's done of the road. It doesn't have any engineering on it, obviously, because here we are, trying to decide on what it is. But, so that's in the process. I just have to, basically I have to pay for it, once I get information feedback from you regarding, and it's not just on the road surface with that site plan. Well, I guess it depends on the engineer. Whether the engineer holds me hostage to pay for the site plan before I get the road site plan, for the site plan for my property, before I get the road site plan. So, I'm waiting, and I need information on my property site plan regarding what we want to do on the south side of Middle Road. I have about 50 feet, and I want to put a two-car garage on that property, or that part of the property, next to my well. And the Benjamins, they want to use, they have about 40 feet from Mill Road to the south edge of town property. And they also want to use, they have 120 feet by 40 feet. I have 67 feet by 50 feet. They want to use that portion of their property for some sort of, use, whatever it is, I don't know, but that's what they've told me. So before I get any site plans, whether a road or a house, I need information from the town regarding the road and if I can put my garage where I want it. There's a question of setback from the road and setback from the town property. And so I want answers from you guys on that. And so I can't supply you with any kind of survey of the road until then. And I'd like to include any engineering in that if it's needed. So this is a whole ball of wax that we're, struggling here, so.
Understood, thank you. I don't know that a site plan of your property and the plans for the house at this point would help us to make a decision
Yeah.
about engineering of the road based on the conversation we've had and I think where we're
I just
looking to
wanted you
go
to
at this
know that it's in
point.
the works, so.
Appreciate
Yeah,
that,
so-
thank you. Alan, did you have?
No, I was just gonna say, start with the road.
Okay. And I also think it's a good idea, as Paul suggested, if we have the chance to take a ride out there and see what the topography looks like and the lay of the land, get a better idea. But ultimately, I think we're gonna, as Mary said, rely on some guidance from Link and police and fire and so on and so forth, so. Any other, excuse me, just before, anything else from the board? Eric?
Craig. I would just say that in no way should anything that's been discussed here tonight be interpreted as approval or as direction, or it's all just friendly conversation.
We're all questioning.
Informal,
understand, yeah.
informal discussion.
Yeah, it's, that's what we need, both of us, the town and the property owners. We need that informal discussion to figure out where to go from here, so.
Good, thank you. Matt?
Hi, my name is Alyssa Benjamin, and I have 14 Middle Road.
Could you speak a little closer?
Oh, sure.
Thank you.
My name's Alyssa Benjamin, and my property is 14 Middle Road, so we are direct neighbors. And we are also hoping to put a single-family house up there. I have 2 girls, but we want 4. And we're a homeschool family, so we're really looking forward to having this being in the middle of nowhere, as everyone says when they say, oh, that's your property? It's in the middle of nowhere. And I think it's a wonderful place, and we're really looking forward to being a part of the Harwich community. But part of the road is we'd really like to keep it as natural as possible. We're not looking for a perfect paved road with side curbs and all of that. We want to keep it as natural as we can, with, of course, making sure that there's adequate access for safety and whatnot that we need, but certainly not going overboard where we would interrupt wildlife or things that are already happening there, because it's a beautiful place that's very peaceful, and both of us, including Jamie, we want to keep it as put a house there but not disrupt too many things that are already there. That makes it a beautiful part of Harwich, including the wildlife and all the things that are there. So I think we're asking for something that is the least invasive to the land and to the area, but that would also provide the correct amount of access, like you said, for fire and for the trucks that would be coming in to bring the materials to our homes. I thank you so much for your advice and guidance. This is my first time. I watched my dad build our dream home, and I'm hoping he gets to see us build ours too. So, thank you.
Great, thank you. I think we can say that we share the same objectives. The reason that we're here tonight is to make that happen some way. We just want to make sure that we're doing it all in the right way
Yeah.
for everybody concerned, so.
One
Anything?
last note.
Sure.
When you're there, on my property, listen. Just listen to no noise. You can't hear any traffic. You might hear the geese down in the pond, but you don't hear any traffic. And so that's the gem that we own. And, you know, we want it to stay that way, so, you know.
Duly noted, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Anything else before we make a motion to adjourn? Can I have a motion to adjourn?
Sure, I move that we adjourn the meeting.
Second?
I'll second that.
All in favor?
Was that Harry or Ellen?
It was Alan, I think.
David?
David Harris, aye.
Ann Tucker, aye.
Emily Brady, aye.
Mary Maslowski, aye.
Harry Munz, aye.
Alan Peterson, aye.
Greg Chadwick, aye. Meeting is adjourned.